get down.
We are live from GitHub Universe 2023, where we had the honor to speak to the builders, the makers, the creators, and the startups. All these fun projects that are coming out, that companies are being built on top of open source. I'm excited because I am joined by Ron Efroni from Flox. Hi, Ron.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So we have to have like origin stories. Why did you make this thing? Were you trying to fix your own problem? Because that's what happens a lot of times. We're like stuck on something and then you're like, there isn't a person to do that, so I'll build it.
Yeah.
But I'd love to understand better, what was your background before you became a founder? And where did the idea for Flox come by?
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to share that. I started off as a software engineer in IDF and then went into startups. From there, most recently, and where I reached the problem space that we're solving was actually when I was leading developer products at Facebook.
Oh, interesting.
And that was the pinnacle curve for me in that developer experience stack. Mm-hmm. The exact day was when I was running this project with an incredible team back at Facebook, where we wanted to take the local developer workflow and start injecting remote capabilities into it. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, the first step was drawing out the entire developer flow in a diagram, because we wanted to know, what do we have to copy over? Where do we want to make changes? And I remember that day we were drawing out the diagram and we had circles, squares, and triangles, and lots of arrows, but the diagram going and going, right? And that's where it really dawned on me that this was how our developers, how we write code today, how we ship ones and zeros and turns them into magical things. And this diagram looked incredibly scary. When you looked at each node in that diagram, it made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But when you took a step back, it was quite ridiculous. This is what developers had to go through every day. And this is what we tried to replicate in order to do this project. And that's where I did take a step back and say, wait a second, why is this happening? And the first conclusion there was that this is happening because development has gotten complex.
Absolutely.
And it's not something new. It's continuously getting more complex. Mm-hmm. But it's reached a point where, at least for me, it felt like, what's going on? And made me wonder if it's not about time that we stripped back these layers that we've built across the last 30 years and really took a look at the core of what it means to develop software with everything that we know about it today. So that was, for me, the biggest driver.
That was your aha moment, looking at that daunting diagram full of squares and arrows and realizing that it wasn't going to end. It didn't fit on a whiteboard, did it? Imagine thinking about being a new engineer in that team, walking into that mapping session.
Yeah, and I think, so that was the start. I was coincidentally connected with my co-founder and CTO, Michael, who was facing the same problem, different industry, which further inspired us.
Interesting.
You know? And that was the starting basis for what is Flox. Michael was actually already working on and looking into this amazing open source community called Nix. Mm-hmm. And as we dug into it, it was very obvious that Nix, who has been around, right? This product has been around for 20 years, had these solutions that we needed and those principles that kind of make software less complex with the reality that we live in. And it felt about time that we were able to bring it to more people, to work, and to other places. So that was where we started off from.
So was there always a foundational model where you were going to work off next? The foundation is there. Was it important for you all that it was an open source project? It had all the good ingredients.
So for me, I've been doing nonprofits and open source for the longest time. I know we're talking a lot about AI. I love AI.
Of course.
But I also fully believe that as a humanity, as a species, open source is the future.
100%.
And today is that future. It's what is allowing us to have a shared mind and work on shared projects and actually excel together. So for me, open source is a foundation. But to your question, it was obvious that this technology and community had everything we needed to solve that problem. And it meant the world to us that we can embrace and run with the open source.
The collective mind. In essence, that's what's accelerating human progress more than anything else. We're able to collaborate. There's an existing awesome shout out to the Nix community. What you've been building is awesome enough. Someone like legit found the solution and built a company on top of it. What was your first MVP? Where are you now? If someone is watching and they're thinking, yeah, I'm tired of trying to map this out for my team, how can the tool help them and how can they get started using it?
So I'll split this off into two. Number one, I'm also one of the board members of the NixOS Foundation. And
fantastic.
And the mission of Flox, other than bringing these principles to more people and bringing Nix to more people, it's also directly supporting and growing this community because it needs to reach further heights. And then like the startup objective of what are we even doing as a company is bringing these concepts of Nix into enterprises, extending what this community is and to who it goes to. So sorry, but you asked the question. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. I'd love to know what was like the first MVP that you had when someone outside started using Flox. How was that original first version of the product and a little bit of a journey to now?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So first thing was that the whole concept of open source and Nix is core tenet for Flox. So
beautiful.
A huge part of the company and the folks that work in the company are part of the Nix community in some way, and we're always involved within it because Nix itself needs to grow. The MVP moment for us was that Nix is so many things, and that's the beautiful aspect of it, right? Other than human progress, it's the beauty of it is that it's a green field, right? It allows you to come in, be embraced, and do the magic that you want to do, and maybe it'll get adopted by some, maybe you won't, but you'll have that space to do it. Nix is the largest open source package repository in the world. It's our second year in a row, like top 10 on GitHub for contributor count. It's also a operating system. Nix is a lot of things. The most exciting part of it was what Nix can bring, going back to unraveling the core layers of software development. The way that we view it and I view it is that if we can start creating more mutual and shared levels inside software development. The way I view that diagram, you can also view it like a building. It's like over 30 years, we've built another layer and another layer. Here, I'm saying Nix has the potential to take 5 layers and just bring them into one. Right? And all of a sudden, someone might want to get to the 6th floor of your building, but instead of climbing 6 floors, they only need to climb 2. For us, the biggest advantage that we were looking to bring is the whole concept of having a reproducible environment that can go anywhere and run on any type of platform, right? Now, on my diagram that I talked about at Facebook, you had an environment for production and testing and local and development and CI, and everything was different. And maybe our developers were running on Macs, but our CI was running on everything was slightly different. And all those slight differences was creating that complexity that meant that we had to handle that. And developers, instead of, again, working on the beauty of coding and innovating, they were having to like, does it work on my machine? Do I have to handle this issue or that issue?
All the boring things that no one likes doing. I love the idea of making it simpler.
So for us, it was about how do we introduce this core shared environment that can be used by any developer anywhere. That's where we started off. Nix does this beautifully. We introduced the Flox environment to do that, and that's our building block at the first stage.
Okay, excellent. Are you able to share how many users you have? This is an enterprise first product, right? Primarily for enterprises or
no? PLG. So
nice.
Our product is open source. It's on GitHub. Nix also runs on GitHub. Huge shout out to the GitHub team that puts up with us because we have a lot of traffic coming on GitHub. But yeah, so our project is PLG, open source, grassroots, bottoms up.
Fantastic. Okay. And have you heard any stories from folks that are using it? Anything that stands out? I love the idea of the collapsible building. Like that just get me where I need to go. But any other like stories that you heard from
I think
your users?
The funnest story, we have a few fun stories. I think one fun story is someone pretty high up in a public company used us and was just incredibly compelled by just the user experience that we were able to put into, right? For me, bringing this tool out there, the core focus of it was that I wanted to create a happy path, a golden path, right? I wanted folks to drop into Flox and for it to be very intuitive. How do I get from A to D? There's 2 steps in the middle, obviously, B and C, and I'm there. I really like the NixOS Foundation hat, but I also wear my Flox hat. When I look at the Nix OS side of things, the Nix community side of things, that means that someone's coming and telling you, hey, yeah, this is the order that open source is all about. No, there should be 50 ways of doing it, because
absolutely,
for Eric, it might be, I go from A to D through T because it's just, I need that. And for someone else, it could be B and C, but then we shouldn't be limiting that. On the Flox side, that was one of the big first attempts. And we got a lot of positive feedback, at least from the enterprise areas, because a lot of those folks were looking for a more structured, just tell me where to fall in and how to do it. I think that was one big feedback point really at the beginning. The second great feedback point that we received about 2 weeks ago, and I'm horrible with naming, and Eric, so shout out to Eric, but he beat me 1-0 on the puns. He made a blog post called Why You Should Flox Every Day.
This is perfection on a title.
Yeah, and you should be flossing every day.
Yes, shout out our kids. That's awesome.
And he just ran through that entire journey about how starting to introduce these shared concepts of environments that you can scale and take with you, whether it's local or into production, are seen as incredibly meaningful and impactful in this much more complex environment that we're building software today. This is going to grow from here, right? We're talking about AI. It's not the core item, but we call this entire problem space the squeeze.
I like that.
Where you have industry forces, you have forces from the left and forces from the right pushing and squeezing, not like a friendly squeeze, but a painful one, on the person in the middle. And the person in the middle is the developer, it's us. From the left, you have software complexity. The repositories are bigger. The amount of dependencies, like when you ran Yarn, how many modules does it spit out? If you rolled 40 years back, everything you got from the left was some guy inside the company that wrote this code 10 years ago. Now you're just using this spaghetti code. And on the right, you have CVEs and security standards and compliance. We need
super important,
but it's all coming in. And what you mentioned earlier, right? Instead of developers focusing on the fun aspects of innovating, writing a lot of code that turns into beautiful functionality, we're focusing on all of these other problems that feel like a bummer.
Exactly.
That's the general space that we've been looking at.
That is amazing. Love the fact that it's built on top of a open source product and that you're super invested in the community as well. That's great. So if I want to use, shout out Nix, it's on GitHub. Go check it out. If I want to contribute to Flox as a project, then I'm able to on GitHub.
Yeah, we're fully on GitHub. Our mental model for a startup is that we wear multiple hats with the open source.
Right.
For us, it's really open. Without the open source, like without Nix, Flox doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And it's something that people need to be really aware of. Obviously, it's not just Flox and Nix. There's so many companies out there building on top of open source, building on top of communities.
100%.
And in reality, it's building on top of the shoulders of giants, right? And ideally, these companies are also giants that in the future, it's a recursive, right? We're all standing on the shoulders of each other. For Flox at least, we're building on top of Nix. We're injecting as much as we can into growing the community. And then we're building on top of that, meaning that there's mutual benefit going all around. If we're able to make Nix better because we're building on top, then we're also going to be better. I've also seen a lot of companies try and build on the side of the open source, so take the open source and build in parallel. And I find that concerning. So I feel if you start building in parallel to an open source, that creates a sense of competing with the open source. And I think that's not net positive for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're working towards making each other better versus you're trying to make a side, a lot of those companies fail also, by the way, when you try, because communities seen right through it. You can come to an open source project and you know this, you're sitting on the board of Nix. You gotta have that genuine investment and really care about the tech enough that you're gonna be there now and you're working to build your company ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and it's also like a completely different hat, because inside the community, I think one beautiful moment I had a few years ago in Nix was that someone came up to me and mentioned, can you just remember to make sure that whatever we do, we keep Nix fun? And sometimes we forget that.
Yeah.
Because all of these amazing folks, ourselves, everyone out there, they're coming in and they're doing this they're not getting paid to do this, right? Most folks are.
For the joy of it, they like it.
So I think that was really meaningful for me. And when I'm thinking about things inside of Nix and like growing Nix and making it better and stronger and more supported and bigger community, it roots me back down to, is it still enjoyable? Are we still able to have fun? If not, then I feel like we're losing some of that open source magic.
Absolutely. You have a serious commitment to keeping it fun. So if you're in the community and haven't checked out Flox, go ahead and give Flox a check out. And we heard it here first. Ron is committed to keeping it fun for all developers. So thank you for that. So now, if I want to try the solution, go to GitHub. Where can we find you? Before we get into what's next and where to find you, I have to ask the AI question. This is here to stay, and it's an interesting conversation, especially when we're talking about developer tools and things that are supposed to make developers' lives easier, and a lot of complexity there, a lot of opportunity. How do you feel about all this? The fourth industrial revolution? What are you thinking? Where do you see the impact for Flox as a company, next an ecosystem? Tell me what you're thinking.
It's definitely exciting and concerning and all at once. The most important aspects of AI, because again, I'm very entrenched in the open source ideology. I want to make sure that AI and the growth of AI is again a net positive for open source. It can help empower our contributors, help us do things from documentation or inline comments so that the next person contributing knows what the hell is going on in here.
Yeah.
But on the concerning side, and you're seeing that, but it's like open source is built about trust. It's built around, I've never met you. So we've done a few like NixCons. I've been working with people for years. And then I see them in person and I look at their name and I'm like, wait a minute, but what's your GitHub handle?
So-and-so.
We're on the marketing team together and the documentation, and we're working on that. It's really built on trust,
100%.
like faceless trust. And it's built on fun. I feel that I'm contributing to something bigger than myself.
100%.
And the scary bit about AI for me is that there's potential for AI to leverage all of this code that has amassed because of trust for privatized use, right, in mass scale. And I just want to make sure that we be thoughtful about that and not diminish of what it means to be open source, because I don't want contributors thinking twice about making a code contribution. I want to see how we can leverage AI, but also maintain what it means to do open source and the excitement about it.
Absolutely. That is why it's so important that people in open source leadership like yourself are actually exploring that and thinking about these conversations, because we can't ignore it. It's happening. It's here to stay. We're not going to roll back to the time where we didn't know what this was. Like I think our CEO mentioned yesterday, like we come a long ways from the auto-completion, which that was like the original idea, right? Like the novel idea at the time. We come a long ways from that. And yes, there is a lot of net positives, but they have to be handled responsibly. And I can see people's hesitations. And like you said, how does it feel? It feels terrifying, but also really exciting.
Contribution itself will change completely, right? Maybe at some point, AI generated code is going to surpass human generated code. And maybe contribution won't necessarily be about how do you write this function or how do you make that fix, but more about how do you manage, right, that LLM model to do all of that for you times 10, and then all of that human advancement will catapult way further. I just want to make sure that we trend towards that rather than being scared to make contributions because will something take advantage of it and take it out of context.
Absolutely. I think the only way that we can grow this responsibly is by being a part of it, because it's going to happen whether we're in it or not. So it's important that people understand the concept of standing on the shoulders of giants and actually give a hoot about open source, stay in the conversation, and bring that leadership so that we're moving forward in a responsible way. I see a lot of positives, especially for the open source ecosystem. I get exactly what you're saying. I never want to lose that when you're going to a conference and you're meeting people, and like that impact that those nameless folks that you're just like, you're a GitHub handle, but then it's, holy crap, what you helped me with. Or I remember when I submitted a PR and you're the person that helped me correct it, and then I got immersed in the project and there is my contribution. You don't want to miss that. And I don't think we have to. We just work together towards just keeping it growing, and hopefully some of the things that keep us busy doing other stuff like all this bug reporting and all this documentation, those are the things that AI can help with, and then that creative and all that innovation can still remain from the giants whose shoulders we continue to stand on.
I hope so.
Thank you for that's a super thoughtful answer, and I love that perspective, and especially from someone that's in the open source community and a leadership position. It's very refreshing to hear, because I've heard a lot of terrifying, we want to run and shut it down, and that's not going to happen. So
by the way, the reason I don't say that is I don't think that's feasible.
Yeah.
I think AI is like a mini arms race, and we have to take advantage of it. We just need to make sure that it goes, ideally, as much leaning towards what is net positive and helpful, and and not. And that's also probably a very loaded statement because what does that even mean? But,
Yeah, but we're figuring it out day by day. That's why it's important to come to standard things and actually find out what's happening, what the big companies are thinking in the way of this innovation. So what's next for Flox?
Yeah, we're working on a few exciting announcements in the coming weeks. Within the community, we just announced with our teams that we're going to have the first Nix convention outside of Europe ever. It's going to happen in March, and we're going to be announcing it officially in a week or two. So that's the first ever Nix huge gathering outside, and I'm really stoked about it. Yeah, and I think you asked earlier, you can probably nixos.org, flox.dev is where Flox happens. If you're curious about Nix, we've been doing a lot of pure Nix. We call it nixinthewild.com, where we interview companies that have been using Nix because it's felt for a long time like a secret that not a lot of people want to talk about, but a lot of big companies are using Nix. Wow. And if you want to read up on these cases, the last one we did was Google, who implemented Nix and ID. But yeah.
That is fantastic. We'll link in the show notes the website, the blogs, the interviews, and the org, and Flox. So if I want to keep up with you, where can I find you on Twitter, LinkedIn? Where can I hear about this announcement? I want to know when the conference is going to be and where.
Conference, we're going to be posting it across the NixOS official channels and the Flox official channels. We have the Flox newsletter, and then there's also the Flox development social media handles across Twitter, LinkedIn, Fastodon. You can really follow us on any of those, and you'll probably get all the news.
Before we go, I wanted to ask you if you have any advice for any founders at any stage. What is one lesson that is a really amazing one? Anything that stands out in particular to you that you're like, I wish somebody said that to me a year ago?
Yeah, if I had to just grab one meta one, it's do it. If you can, do it. I know there's obviously family and financial obligations, but it's an experience you're not going to get anywhere else, whether you're successful or if you fail. I don't think you can fail in a startup. I think folks that take that stride to open up their own thing have already succeeded. How many chances are you going to get to do that? Not a lot.
Faith on yourself, for sure.
And do commend yourself for that and just build. It's cliche, but it really does take a village. It's a whole family effort. It's like your partner, your plus one, your family around you, tell them that you're going to do this. And for me, it's that takes a village concept is also what I lead with, and raising capital, building teams, right? So it's like inside of Flox, everything is fully transparent. There's nothing that is not available from the team that just joined to the executives on the team.
Transparency is huge, though.
And those are just like the quick recommendations. If anyone's interested, I'm always happy to help out like that. So
Folks, run on this. Run! And then definitely, not every day you get a founder that generosity with your time. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Before we go, what do you think of GitHub Universe so far?
Oh, amazing.
Okay, good.
I think one of the best conferences I've been at. The amazing woman that created the GitHub. So I spoke last night on the keynote. Even the template for the keynote was incredible. It was all thought out. Like at the hotel, there's GitHub stick. In the elevator, there's a great crowd. We're also part of GitHub for Startups, which I can't say more than enough good things about the team there. So if folks are looking into opening something, connect with them. It doesn't matter what stage you're on.
100%.
They're just awesome.
I'm so glad you had value from the event, and it's a vibe. You do feel the energy. I know it sounds cliche and cheesy, but I also traveled to a lot of conferences throughout the year, and this has been, you can feel the energy. So I hope to see you next year, of course.
Definitely.
We need to talk to see if maybe we can have someone to NixConf. NixConf, definitely. And folks, don't forget to follow Ron, follow Flox. Contribute to Nix. Let's make it better together. Thank you for your time today. Lovely to meet you. And we'll see you next time. Don't forget, show notes for all of the links that we discussed. And also, please, if you are a builder, you're thinking of creating something, connect with the GitHub Startup team. There's a ton of amazing support there. You get to be a part of a network of founders like Ron. Share all that amazing brain power so that you're not in it alone. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.
GitHub Universe.